So we are now going to be moving on to our next section, which is the Intro to Agile Modeling. And this is going to be a presentation by us. So with that, let me hand it back over to you, Brad.
All right, thank you. My name is Brad Hopper. I'm the GM for the Quantrix business, and I'm going to be presenting to you a couple of slides to introduce Quantrix, what it's about, and why that might be of a benefit to you if you're considering an agile modeling tool. And then in a few minutes after that, I'll pass the baton over to our solutions consultant extraordinaire, Lindsay, who will give you some demonstrations of some Quantrix examples, some pre-built examples, and then also show you how you might start from scratch to build something useful in your business. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so Quantrix is all about providing the most agile modeling experience to planners and business people around the world to help them make better business decisions about their organization and their business moving forward. We're going to answer a couple of questions here as we go through why now and why Quantrix in particular. We'll discuss a little bit of the ecosystem in which technologies like Quantrix live and some alternatives that you might be considering, and what's different about Quantrix and the benefits that might accrue from those differences. Then, as I said, I'll pass the ball over to Lindsay. We may or may not have time to come back for some customer case studies. I think we might today. And with that, I'll kick in here. So the first question maybe is kind of an obvious one, right? You might be asking yourself, why now and why Quantrix? So our answer to that is quite simple. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what time you're in or what kind of business you're in, businesses and the situation around you will be constantly changing. There's no better example of that than the ever-present kind of COVID situation. We had a couple of presenters today mentioning how COVID changed their business and how they relied on the agility of Quantrix to help them adjust their expectations, adjust their assumptions, adjust their plans for the future to react to that. But it doesn't have to be a kind of globe-stopping pandemic in order to really change things up for your organization and provide the opportunity and the need for you to make adjustments to your business plan. And those plans could be relative to your finance organization, to sales operations, to marketing, logistics, HR, really wherever in the business things might change, you might find that Quantrix could be useful to you. So now in the face of change, what is it that you need? Imagine like that you are a manufacturer and you have a pretty sophisticated and detailed supply chain, and suddenly you get the news that a container ship containing a lot of your raw materials has run aground somewhere in the world. True story. What do you do about that? Do you turn to your kind of old school planning and operation modeling system and try to whip something up? More likely, you will be looking for something that's more agile, that's more creative, that lets you kind of prototype and plan. So it's not just that we need to come up with a new plan, we need a new kind of plan, a new approach to planning that helps us be more agile kind of by definition. So such a tool, what would be the ideal kind of tool? We would hopefully allow our smart people in our organization to be creative, but to provide guidelines for them such that they can build models and build plans within the structure of how our business works. We want it to be intuitive. We want new people as well as seasoned modelers to be able to pick it up and run, to be able to rapidly prototype things and then move those into production. As a part of that development of your ideas and your models, of course, we'd like to be able to explore different scenarios, to trade off different business options, and use that information to build the most powerful model that we can for today, but also to deploy those models into use in our organization, to build a front end like Jason showed recently and some of the other presenters showed earlier today, an interactive front end that captures the kind of business problem that we're trying to solve, in addition to the underlying calculations and model and structure that we need it to contain. So those simple production apps will allow you to take that IP and deploy it across the business in the way that it delivers the most value to you. Then, of course, we started the conversation with plans changing. Of course, the plans will yet again continue to change. And so we want to make sure that those applications that we build and the models underneath them are resilient themselves to modifications and changes over time. Now, we'll show you in this presentation that Quantrix can deliver on these kind of what we believe to be kind of ideal representations of what a modeling tool could be. So Quantrix does not live, and modeling tools do not live in a vacuum. We understand that you have other systems in the organization that you are utilizing. There's oftentimes many different sources of data, but it's easy to kind of distill that down to two different types, for an example here. It's very often the case that you will have financial information on the one hand, whether that be an ERP system, a CRM system, or just a classic finance system. And then you'll have an operational system. So if you're a manufacturer, you might have a warehouse system or a shop floor management system. If you are a shipping and distribution company, you might have a supply chain or logistics solution. If you're an insurance company, you might have a claims system in addition to your finance system. And more often than not, the most important decisions and the most important plans and models that you want to make for your organization will require gaining access to these two different types, and probably more, two different types of data and bringing them together. And similarly, you want to extract data from these systems, but they're also your systems of record. So you will very likely need to push conclusions back to those systems. Let's say your budget or forecast of record that you need to operate to for the next period, or perhaps your manufacturing plan or your goals and objectives for signing up new business for your insurance company or whatever the case may be. Now then, as well, most organizations will have adopted one or perhaps many different business intelligence tools that they want to use for reporting. They want to use those technologies to slice and dice data and look at the scenarios that might be generated in a modeling environment and help facilitate the decision making to make the call on which plan to go forward with. So as you can see, there's lots of different systems in the ecosystem, but oftentimes that gap in the middle has no solution, or worst case scenario, it's being filled today with spreadsheets. Now, the reason why we say spreadsheets are not a solution to that is because we don't believe that spreadsheets are an actual modeling tool. You can use spreadsheets for modeling, but there are a number of downsides to that, which I'll go into in a few moments. So modeling, we're representing this here as kind of one icon in the middle, but more than likely, you'll end up having multiple models that relate to one another, feeding information from one to another, and then again, as I said earlier, pushing that operational data and reference data back into those systems of record. Okay, so let's talk about some of the alternatives that you might consider when thinking about your planning system or modeling system. So first, out of the gate, if you, let's say you're a supply chain management system or a supply chain organization, for certain you will have supply chain software, and also for certain there will be some planning and optimization technology inside of that solution. But very often that technology is highly tuned to that specific use case and won't allow you to get data from different systems. You won't be able to put your finance data in there. You won't be able to potentially put your shipping and logistics information in there or your warehouse information. So, and very often these technologies, because they're highly tuned, will also be somewhat difficult to learn and use. So I would say, although these are useful for their specific kind of niche use case, they're not typically the right tool to choose for a more broad-based across the organization modeling and planning capabilities. Now, there are historical tools out there. Hyperion comes to mind. There are a few others, but there are a next generation of tools in this kind of lineage, like Anaplan you might have heard of, or Adaptive Insights. These are really, I would say, an evolution of those historical planning tools. They're not really modeling tools so much as they are platforms for building planning and budgeting systems. So they involve lots of consulting, they require a lot of heavy lifting, they tend to be fairly slow. In the end, they do scale well once you build those kinds of applications, but they are by no means agile from a modeling perspective. You can't just sit down with a clean sheet of paper and blue sky some ideas and then come up with a plan to move forward. So these planning applications do scale on this axis, but they're not very agile. Now, I alluded to spreadsheets a bit earlier. They're extremely agile, as we all know. You can do anything in a spreadsheet, from planning the lineup for your soccer team to planning a potluck dinner. You can also do some financial modeling there. But the agility of spreadsheets turns out to be both its strength and its weakness, because it's so easy to make mistakes in those spreadsheets, and it's difficult to enforce rules and best practices that you may have, because there's no structure that the spreadsheets provide out of the box themselves. You have to construct that structure itself, and everything is overloaded in the spreadsheet. The data itself, the structure, and the features and functions and calculations all have to live inside of a single cell. Indeed, they have to live inside of every single cell in that spreadsheet, and they're highly prone to errors and failure. So as you can see, we don't believe that spreadsheets are a good alternative for planning and modeling solutions. Now, you're talking to Quantrix, so we like to put ourselves here in the upper right-hand corner, but hopefully through the rest of the presentation, we'll explain to you why we believe that's the case and show you some examples of that. Now, the next slide here is a kind of special enunciation of all of the various challenges that people experience with spreadsheets. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. I think everyone who is a regular user of spreadsheets would recognize that these are just facts. They're not really our opinion. There's documented evidence of spreadsheet errors across the world, and documented errors of the kinds of consequences that can go, things that can go wrong as a result of those errors. So I probably don't need to quote you chapter and verse about all the challenges that you can experience with spreadsheets. I'm going to skip a couple of slides here down to the benefits, and then we'll go directly to our presentation. Okay, so I spoke about these kind of ideal capabilities that you might hope to find in a modeling solution, and made the claim that Quantrix has these capabilities. What would be the benefits if we indeed did deliver those capabilities to you? So this idea of providing structure yet allowing your employees to be creative will unleash the out-of-the-box thinking from your planners. It will allow them to deliver easy to understand model behavior that also does the job. This idea of rapid development and delivering a modeling experience that's intuitive will help your planners design as they go, to prototype, to come up with a new idea, to test it out, to try it out, and then to include that in your best practice moving forward if that works out for you. And it will provide the fastest experience when you are starting from zero. You know, you don't know yet whether you should build this business, or you're trying to make a determination as to whether you should purchase this new asset or this new company. You don't have historical information to guide you there. You have to make your own estimates, build your own model from a clean sheet of paper, and this intuitive rapid development can facilitate that. The ability to create and explore scenarios will allow you to plan different alternatives in case the business conditions change, and you can plan them ahead of time. You can imagine for yourself what would be the outcome if our business changed in this way, or if we had a new competitor, or if one of our key suppliers were to go out of business or raise their prices. What would we do in those situations, so that you are prepared in the event that those changes take place? And even navigating future options that you might not have ever considered. In many cases, I've talked to customers of ours who have told me that they had opportunities in their business that, because they didn't have the ability to thoughtfully plan them out, that they really missed the opportunity to take advantage of those opportunities. Now then, we talked about production applications. and Lindsay will show you a couple of examples there. One of the key benefits of easy-to-use applications is that you get buy-in from your internal customer or your external customer, for that matter, and as in the case of Jason's presentation earlier. When users can use an application that understands the context of the decision that they are trying to make, they're a lot happier. And if those applications can be based on the fundamentals of a high-performance documented structured model underneath, then everybody wins. You can unify the participation from the stakeholders and deliver a better solution. And then, of course, being resilient over time, you always will want to extend models to include new products, new regions, bring in new cases and new scenarios, and fine-tune those metrics as you move through time in your organization without having to recreate things from scratch. So with that, I'll pass the baton over to Lindsay, who will show you a couple of examples of pre-built applications and illustrate some of the benefits and capabilities of those applications, and then roll back and drill down to illustrating how you might build something like that from scratch.
All right, thank you, Brad, and hi, everyone. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, my name is Lindsay Weber, and I'm a solutions consultant here at Quantrix. And I am really excited to show you a little bit more about Quantrix and some of the amazing things that you can do, whether you're a longtime user or are just now starting to explore Quantrix for your business. So right now I've got our website pulled up here, so I'm just going to give you a brief tour of some of the things that you can check out if you are not currently a Quantrix customer, but you want to experience some of the things that you can do in Quantrix. You can check out our online apps directly on our website here. And I'm going to actually show you a couple of these, but if you want to actually be able to explore and interact with the Quantrix model for yourself, I encourage you to check out our online models on our website. This is one of them. This is our integrated financials demo model that you can check out for yourself. And again, we've already seen a few different examples of how you can utilize Quantrix on the cloud and deploy your models here to share and collaborate with other users. But this is just one more example, again, to show you that from the cloud and directly from a canvas, you have the ability to interact with a model live. You can create workflows so that users can pass through different portions of your model, look at different scenarios, apply different methods, and do a lot of really great live interaction and experimentation in the model. The one other piece I'll show you here, we've got just an operating cash flow visualization here in a couple scenarios for debt. And I think we saw this in a previous demonstration, and we'll talk about how we actually do this in a moment. But if we were presenting this model or this use case in a business meeting and somebody said, okay, but what if we had a different scenario that we wanted to test or evaluate and compare here? How do we do that? As Brad's pointed out, we could definitely try and go do that in a spreadsheet, but we probably couldn't do it live directly in that meeting. It's going to take a little bit of time to set up and extend out some formulas and things like that. But in Quantrix, we can simply click an existing scenario and press enter on our keyboard. And when we do that, you can see that this third scenario, which maybe is going to be a 45% debt ratio here, is automatically added to our model, and we would just be able to go in here live and either populate these assumptions ourselves or even just copy them from an existing scenario. But we haven't looked at any formulas here. All of this is directly from the outward-facing presentation mode of the model. But what's happening behind the scenes here is that Quantrix is handling the formulas and extending our model automatically for us because of the way Quantrix manages structure. So that is a sneak peek as to what we're going to do. But again, just a brief highlight here that if you'd like to check out this model or some of the other models that we have, you can come to our website, quantrix.com, and check out our online apps. Okay, so let's jump in to a blank model here, and let's talk about how you might want to get started. So again, if you're a new Quantrix investigator, not a current customer, and you've seen some of these presentations and are amazed, but also a little bit intimidated, don't be. We're going to show you how you can get started and why Quantrix is actually pretty easy to start building from scratch. So now we've opened Quantrix on the desktop here, and I've started a blank model, and we start with just a single matrix here. So let's say that we want to create a forecast model here that projects out our sales of some products that we sell over a period of a year. So the first thing I'll do is put my products into this first forecast matrix. So I'll name our product category, And you can see that Quantrix has automatically named my first item or my first row here as product 1. And if I click on it and press enter on my keyboard a few times, you can see that Quantrix automatically generates some additional products for me. So next, I'm going to create our time dimension or our time category. And so I'll call this column category as quarter. And I'm going to shorten quarter 1 to just Q1. And again, just press enter on my keyboard a few times here to extend out to our full year. So now we have Q1 through Q4, and we have 5 products. But let's say that we sell these products across a variety of different regions. So let's create a region category next. And I'm going to move it out to the side here. And let's call region 1 North, press enter, South, and maybe we have 3 regions. North, South, and East. So you can see with just a few clicks here that we've expanded our forecast matrix to be 3-dimensional, and it's got all of our products in it, and we've got all of our quarters, and we've got North, South, and East in here. Now, this is going to be our forecast, but ahead of time, I've gone in and actually brought in some sample actuals data that we want to use as the baseline for our forecast assumptions. So we've got some Q1 actuals data that we've aggregated here using data import within Quantrix, and I think we've talked quite a bit about that today, but if you have questions about it, please do drop it in the chat and we can cover it in more detail. But we've got these Q1 actuals, and you can see that they are summarized at the store level, and we've got some products and some services, and we've got kind of the region definition here within the actuals data as well. So if we wanted to bring this in as the baseline for our forecast, how would we do it? Well, again, in a spreadsheet, we might need something like a VLOOKUP or maybe a sum product because we've got our region and our products over here. But in Quantrix, you'll notice that oftentimes we don't need those types of lookup functions. Instead, we can use the really easy structure that we've built here to accomplish this for us automatically. So the first thing I'll do is bring my product category from actuals over into our forecast because these are the real names of the products and the services that we sell, not these placeholders that we created originally. And when I do that, you can see now that all of our product names have updated and we've got products ABC and services A and B. The benefit here of these linked categories is that if for some reason we came in and said, well, product A isn't actually called product A, maybe it's called our new product. We can make that change in one place, anywhere in our model, and anywhere where this product category is linked, Quantrix is going to manage and maintain that change for us. By a similar token, if we added an additional product or service, maybe this becomes service C, same outcome applies here, right? So now service C has also been added to our forecast for us automatically. So whereas we have some concerns in spreadsheets on extending named ranges or making sure that formulas are covering all of our new additions to our business, that's typically not something that you need to be worried about in Quantrix. Okay, so let's write our first formula here in Quantrix. And you've seen a lot of examples where we've seen Quantrix models with several hundreds of thousands of cells, if not millions, and very few formulas. And if you've never seen Quantrix before, you might be wondering, how is that even possible? Well, let's show you with a very basic formula to get started. So we want to bring our Q1 actuals in. So we'll write a single formula here by clicking on Q1 in our forecast and pressing the equal sign on our keyboard. And you can see that in Quantrix, all of our formulas are kept separate from cells. In fact, they're kept below all of the cells in your model here. So what do we want Q1 to be equal to? Well, it's just the sum of the total sales from Q1 actuals. And we need to somehow relate the regions together between these two different matrices. So in Quantrix, we can do this really just writing it as we would say it. So our sum of Q1 actuals, our total sales, using the region here in Q1 actuals as the region here in our forecast. And when we press enter, you'll notice that we get multiple cells filled in with the proper values, all of these coming from our Q1 actuals table, our Q1 import. All right, so we've written a single formula here. And again, by the same token, if for some reason we had an additional region of data that we added, pressing enter on our keyboard, you can see that our formula is automatically extending to contain and calculate the values for that new region as well. Just another kind of showcase of how Quantrix is agile and dynamic. In a spreadsheet, we might be concerned with a lookup on pivoting our data in different dimensions or different directions. In Quantrix, it doesn't actually matter how we view the data. So for example, if we wanted to view region maybe across the top instead, we can move these categories in any direction, and you'll notice that all of our formulas, all of our values continue to work regardless of how we pivot our data. And again, this is because Quantrix manages all of our logic based on the structure that we've written within our model and what we've created, not on the individual cell coordinates of all of the data within our model. All right. So let's go ahead and close our Q1 actuals, and let's add a little bit more to our forecast here. So it's not a forecast if we're not projecting values out through the remainder of the year. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's write a really simple formula here just to get us going with the assumption that we think our sales are going to double quarter over quarter. So I'll press enter on my keyboard, and let's write a new formula here. And what we'll type is this. We want this quarter to be equal to the previous quarter times 2. So essentially look at the previous quarter's value, multiply that by 2, and that's what I want this current quarter to be equal to. And when I press enter on my keyboard, you'll see now we've populated all of the remaining cells here within our forecast. So every single quarter for every product across every region, we're doubling the previous quarter's sales values to get the projected values through the remainder of the year. All right. So let's add just a little bit more dynamic functionality here to this forecast. So obviously what we've done so far is just doubled the sales quarter over quarter, but that's probably not very realistic. So let's say instead that we know that the sales are actually going to vary based on the region that we're selling the products in. So I've simply brought over our region category into this new growth rates matrix, and I'll rename this category B as scenario so that we can test out a few different options here. And let's call our scenario 1 as expected and convert these values to percentages. And I'll just go ahead and go in here and put in some sample growth rate values that we think we're going to see for each region. And now we want to use these to calculate the growth that we see for all of our products across all of our regions for the remainder of the year. So how do we do that? Well, again, we don't need any VLOOKUPs. We don't need any sum products because our region category, this common structure, is used between our forecast and our growth rates matrix. So we actually don't even need to write a new formula. We can simply come into this original forecast formula that we wrote, and instead of multiplying by 2, we want to tell Quantrix to multiply using our scenarios in our growth rates matrix. And when we press enter, you'll see a lot of values have updated here, and you might be wondering if these are really accurate and whether or not we're actually calculating the right projected sales values. So let's do a quick check to make sure using something in Quantrix called the Dependency Inspector. So if I bring up the Dependency Inspector using Control D, you can see that we can view in green here the current cell that we're highlighted on. So this North region product B Q3, total projected sales is 540,579. And if we come down to the formula, we can actually see the individual components that are driving this value. So hovering over the previous quarter, you can see, in fact, yes, that our previous Q2 value was 514,000. And the growth rate that we are multiplying by here is 105%, which is, in fact, the North region's expected growth rate. So we'll go ahead and close that. So we don't have a good forecast unless we have multiple scenarios to test. So let's add a couple more options here that we can compare. So we have an expected growth rate scenario, but let's say that we have a low case and we have a high case. And just for the sake of simplicity, let's go ahead and say that the low scenario is going to be expected times 90%, and the high is going to be expected times 110. Okay, so now we have 3 different scenarios for our growth rates for our sales. What if we wanted to compare all 3 of these different cases side by side in our forecast? Well, again, in a spreadsheet, probably going to need to do a little bit of work, probably copy a data set, maybe duplicate a tab, but in Quantrix, hopefully you're catching on here. We don't need to do any of that. All we have to do is grab our scenario category from growth rates and drop it into our forecast matrix. And you'll see now that we have greatly increased the size, but also the value of this forecast matrix just simply by dragging and dropping that scenario category over here into forecast. And so likewise, at this point, if I close growth rates, we can very easily pivot our data different directions. Maybe we only want to see a comparison of our Q4 sales across all of our regions, or maybe one region at a time. We can group this data, pivot it in any direction, and all of the formulas in our model here are going to continue to function. And by a similar token, even from the forecast here, we could add a new scenario, and we could continue to expand this model even further. So the last thing I will do here, and then I will take a pause to see if there's any questions coming in, is we've looked at a lot of canvases. We've seen some really fancy ones from some current Quantrix customers. How easy is it to build a canvas? Well, let's build one really quickly here. I'll come up to the canvas icon here to create a new one. And you can see we just start with a blank sheet of paper, really. And you have lots of options for interactive components that you can add. For our case, let's just add our forecast matrix and our growth rates here down below. And then we like to always show that it's very easy, even from the canvas as you've seen, we could very quickly here, again, re-add a new scenario or even add an additional product or service. You can do this all from the presentation view in Quantrix as well. And if you want it to get particularly interactive for your users, you can always add things like these sliders or other widgets if you'd like to be able to project out the difference in the growth rates for users. You can automatically see this update directly from a canvas. So with that, I will pause and let Brad or Brendan field any questions that we might have coming in.
Yes, there's a question here.
Right.
This person is asking, is it expected that the data always has values for every combination, or is there a way to look at more hierarchical data?
Yeah, good question. So I encourage you to check out once our recordings are posted online. Yesterday in our day one of our conference, we do show you how to manage hierarchical data in Quantrix. It's certainly something that you can do. It's obviously very common to happen in the real world where you don't have perfectly symmetrical data across all of your models. So in Quantrix, we have the ability to group data by different pieces or different relationships. So you might only sell new product and product B in the North region, and maybe you sell service A and service B and new product in the South region. All of those types of groups, or ragged hierarchies as we often call them, can be represented in Quantrix. Grouping is a great way to do that. There are also other methods that we can use to ensure that we maintain those relationships across your data. Good question.
Here's a question about traceability and auditability. Is it possible to keep track of who's made what changes to a model over time?
Absolutely. Yep. Great question. So if I come up to tools, you'll see, and a lot of folks have already talked about this in their presentations, but under security, we have the ability to manage roles and generate those unique experiences or unique access levels between our different users. But also we have something called the audit trail. So if we open the audit trail, it's currently turned off, but let's go ahead and turn it on so that you can see this. The audit trail is exactly what it sounds like. So you have the ability here to record every individual change that is made to your model. So whether that's adding new items, whether that's changing scenario values, maybe we come over here and we change north to 112%. You can see that the audit trail is recording every change that's made within our model, whether that's creating new structure, whether that's changing a formula, whether that's changing an input cell value. Of course, I'm the only person here in this model right now, but you do get the timestamp and the user who has made that change. And this also applies to models on the cloud. So if you create a model on the desktop and you deploy it to the cloud and you want to be able to trace the individual changes that are made in either place, the audit trail will be able to manage and track that for you.
Lindsay, here's another question about you're talking about the cloud. How do we get a model like you're building here to the cloud?
Great question. So it's actually quite easy. So if we decided that this was the way we wanted our model to be shared and we're ready to collaborate with other folks on this model, we could simply come up here to Cloud on our top menu here and click Publish to Cloud. And it's going to ask me to confirm my username and password for the cloud, which I already have in here. And then you have the ability to name your model as something else and leave a comment so that Quantrix can manage the versions of your model after you've published it to the cloud for the first time. We can do some configuration here, of course, if we have other people that we want to assign specific user access permissions to, we can do that here as well. I'll just go ahead and click on through to the end here and say that we're ready to finish and push this model out. Quantrix automatically pops up a unique link for us where we can directly come in, and we will essentially what it's going to pop you open into is the model directly from here. So directly from that link with your username and password, it will drop you directly into that model. And then from the home page, as you're logged in, you'll have the ability to share that model with other users. You can check out the model directly from here as well, and also view different versions of the model.
There's another question, Lindsay. You showed how you enter multiple different formulas that are not living in the cells. Is it possible to put formulas in the cells? And then another question is, can the formulas overlap one another, and what do you do if they overlap?
Yeah, great question. So let's create a new matrix just to show this very quickly here. So I'm going to add out a couple items here for us. So the answer to both questions is kind of yes. So let's tackle the first one here first. So you absolutely still can have an individual formula per cell. So I've clicked on this D1E1 coordinate here, so this cell right here, and press the equal sign. The formula is still going to be displayed down beneath the matrix, but you can very easily assign a single formula or a single value to a cell on an individual basis. Typically, you're not going to need to do that because obviously the common structure across your model, the example we like to use is gross profit is always revenue minus cost of goods sold. But if you do have a particular case where you need to very specifically define the logic for an individual cell, you can of course do that in this way. Now, to answer the secondary question of can you have multiple formulas within the same cell or the same groups of cells, you can in Quantrix, and let's show you what happens when you do that. So if I click on E1 here, and I say that I want all of the cells in E1, so across this entire row, to be equal to, let's say, 200, let's do that and press enter. So now you can see that our original value of 100 for D1E1 has been overwritten essentially by this secondary formula here. And it's quite small, but hopefully you can see beneath both of these formulas, we have a message from Quantrix that says that this formula is being eclipsed, or we have cells that are being overlapped with more than one formula. And when we click on these cells up here, what we'll notice, of course, is that D1E1 is the issue that's causing our problem here. And when we click on this individual cell, you might be able to tell depending on the screen resolution, but this formula down below has kind of a striped shading. And again, that's a way that Quantrix is visually indicating for us that there's a potential that we may want to reevaluate how we've established our formulas here. So there is a great functionality here within Quantrix for the use case of maybe you want to keep this formula here for D1E1, but the remainder of the cells in E1, you still want to be this 200 value. The easy thing for us to do is come down to this second formula here, right click, and we'll have this option for insert skips. And insert skips does exactly what it sounds like. If we click this, you'll notice that Quantrix detects which cell we probably want to skip for this formula. So now we've retained our 100 value from that initial formula, but all of the remaining cells in E1 we've applied just by implementing this little skip description here within the formula.
Can you say something about visualization? The question is, does Quantrix have any charting and visualization capability?
It certainly does, yes. So if we jump back to our canvas here, I'll just show you kind of briefly with this pop-up. Quantrix comes with a suite of different types of visualizations that you might want to include, everything from scatter plots to stacked bar charts and pie charts and combination charts. So there's a wide variety here that you have the ability to use, and it's quite easy to just assign your data to one of these different chart types, and then you have, very similar to Excel, the full capability of customizing the colors and the look and the feel of the charts. So there are quite a few good options here from a visualization standpoint. We saw a couple here on the cloud, I could pull open our model here again, but you do certainly have kind of a full suite of options here within Quantrix that you can, of course, then deploy on your canvas and then through the cloud as well. So certainly you do have the option of creating visualizations directly within Quantrix, and there are quite a few that we come with out of the box.
Here's another question, Lindsay. Is it possible to restrict the values that can be entered in a given cell?
Yes, great question again. So let's use our growth rates maybe for an example here. So if we come down to expected, we had set the formatting here to be percentages because these are growth rates, but nothing would stop me at this point of putting in something here like we could write in 1, for example, right? And of course, our formulas here are going to break because 1 is not a number, right? So what we can do, just as a quick example, we can select this group of cells, and in Quantrix, we have the ability to constrain the input, whether that's to a certain range of values or even a certain type of values. So for example, we could certainly come down here if we wanted to and say, you know, these growth rates need to be decimals and they need to be, you know, greater than 0, and we have to have a value. We could configure all of this here through the constraint input window and click OK. And if we come down and try and do something like this, Quantrix is going to stop us and say you can't actually put something in that is ONE. We need an actual decimal value here that's greater than 0. So this again applies to, you know, you can do the inverse if you're looking for a you know, a word as an input or a certain type of number value or a range of values or even a list of options or a selection that you want to give the user. All of those can be configured through constraint input.
Here's a question, Lindsay. You've only shown kind of simple formulas. Can you say something about what kinds of functions are available to the user? Do you have, for example, distribution functions?
Great question. Yes. So I'm going to just open one of our matrices here, and you can always view the formulas and the functions available to you in Quantrix by clicking our functions button here. There's a variety of different places that you can pull it up from our top menu as well. But here's our functions library here on the left. I would say virtually any formula that you use in Excel, you're probably going to find here within the Quantrix function library as well. So specifically talking about distributions, we absolutely do have statistical functions here available to you in Quantrix. One is called forecast, which is essentially a kind of a linear trend regression type of function. We've got the different statistical types of distributions, gammas. You can do even things to, you know, IRR and net present value, Fisher inverse. There's quite a few different statistical and distribution type functions available to you here in Quantrix. And as you click them, of course, you can see a description of what the functions parameters are, and you can always get some help too. We've got some good examples in sample models if you have some questions on how those work. Typically, the biggest difference, of course, as you've seen between Quantrix formulas and writing a formula in Excel is the syntax. So the arguments typically within the formula are quite similar to what you would use in Excel, but of course, you're not going to have the cell coordinates within the function itself. You're going to use the common structure and the common names of the objects within your model here in Quantrix.
So another question is how would I try Quantrix if I wanted to? How do I get access to that? And is it possible to use Quantrix with my own data or see how that would work?
Yes, awesome questions. So let me come back to our website really quickly here. So if you go to quantrix.com, you can click free trial here, and you will have access to our full product here that we've just demonstrated for 30 days. So you just would have to fill out this form and you'll get everything you need. Under support, getting started, we have a full list of free and helpful resources for you. So if you do download the trial, you should definitely check out our tutorial model. It's pretty new. It will get you started hopefully in about 30 minutes to an hour on building your first model here in Quantrix. And then we've got a variety of other sample models and videos and resources that you can use. As far as building out a model with your own data, absolutely, you certainly can do that, and you definitely can do that with the free trial. So we didn't demonstrate how this method worked within our model, but we did mention that this Q1 actuals data came from an external source. So I have a different CSV file that I pulled this data in from. So if you would like to do something similar with your data, you can come up to data within Quantrix, and from import data, you have the ability to bring in that data from a variety of different sources, whether that's a database, a text file, CSV file, or even copy and paste from a clipboard. So that's a great method that oftentimes people like to use. So if you've got data that's sitting in an Excel spreadsheet that you want to bring directly into Quantrix, just copy and paste that directly from your spreadsheet and come into Quantrix here in any blank space and simply hit Control-V, and you'll be able to bring that data directly into Quantrix and configure it, even to create your categories in your structure automatically within Quantrix.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have for now. Is there anything else that you wanted to show, Lindsay, or are you done?
I think that is about it. The only other thing I was going to flash up quickly because we mentioned it. So this is the tutorial model. So if you download the Quantrix free trial, you will get access to this model for free. It's going to come with the resources and the emails that we send you. So you'll have this as soon as you download Quantrix, you'll have access to get going on this tutorial model. We did highlight this a little bit yesterday in our conference material, but everything you need to get started and get your feet wet in Quantrix will get you going here in this tutorial model. And like we said, it should be about an hour or less of time to complete this. And by the end, you'll actually have built your very first model in Quantrix.
Fantastic. So I think we'll end it there unless you have something else to share, Lindsay. And I'd like to thank so do you have something else to share?
Nope, I'm all set.
All right. Then I'd like to thank all of you for joining. If you've joined us sometime earlier today for any of the sessions that we presented, that our customers presented, and then finally this last session of a brief introduction to Quantrix and where we think it fits in your environment. And hope that that was interesting to you and that you learned something and that you will get in touch with us. So at any point, if you'd like to visit our website, it's Quantrix, Quantrix.com, and you can click the contact us button or book a demo button or any of the buttons that we have up there to take advantage of our free trial and learn a little bit more about how our technology might help you. All right, we'll talk to you next time. Signing off for now.